The aliens had never seen a species so fragile, so weak, or so they thought. Captain Eric Cole stood at rigid attention, his uniform crisp, his face unreadable. Before him, towering like armored statues, stood the Zakarans, a warrior race that had conquered countless worlds. Their exoskeletons shimmered under the harsh training lights, their jagged mandibles clicking as they observed the humans with thinly veiled amusement. "This will be interesting," one of them muttered in their guttural language. The Zakaran High Commander, Vorik, stepped forward, his sharp golden eyes scanning the human recruits with barely concealed contempt. "You are the first of your kind to be accepted into our elite training program," Vorik announced. "Consider it an honor. But do not expect mercy. We train warriors, not weaklings." A deep, rolling laughter spread through the ranks of the Zakaran soldiers. One of them, a towering brute named Jektar, leaned down toward Eric, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "I do not understand why your kind even tries. You are soft. Slow. You rely on weapons because you have no claws, no armor, no strength." Eric said nothing. His face betrayed no emotion. Instead, he turned to glance at his fellow human recruits, a diverse group of Earth's finest. Some shifted uncomfortably under the weight of alien eyes, others clenched their fists. Eric, however, merely smirked. "That's what you think," he murmured under his breath. The first test was a brutal combat simulation. Each recruit was thrown into an arena, a vast metallic battleground littered with obstacles, designed to simulate real war scenarios. The rules were simple: survive. Eric and his squad entered cautiously. The walls were high, offering little cover. Hidden drones circled the arena, programmed to fire stun pulses at anything that moved. Above, the Zakarans watched from a high platform, their faces expectant. "This will be over soon," one muttered. The buzzer sounded. The trial had begun. Immediately, the Zakaran recruits, larger, faster, and biologically superior, rushed in like predators. Their movements were sharp, efficient, honed by generations of war. One slammed into a human recruit, sending him sprawling. Another hurled a man into a wall with sickening ease. Eric, however, was watching. Calculating. "They expect us to fight like them," he thought. "They don't know what we're capable of." Instead of engaging in direct combat, Eric signaled to his team. With subtle gestures, they spread out, using the environment to their advantage. The Zakarans, unaccustomed to such tactics, faltered. The first crack in their confidence appeared when a Zakaran warrior lunged at Eric, only to find himself trapped in a chokehold, unable to break free. Above, Vorik narrowed his eyes. "What is this?" he murmured. The humans were adapting. Fast. For the first time, the aliens felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping into their minds: doubt. The test was far from over. But something told Vorik that these creatures were not as weak as they seemed. The arena's air was thick with the scent of sweat and scorched metal. The initial chaos of the trial had begun to settle, but the humans were still standing. That fact alone was enough to silence some of the Zakaran spectators. High Commander Vorik leaned forward on his observation platform, mandibles clicking in interest. He had expected the humans to be wiped out in minutes. Instead, they were adapting, quickly. Down below, Eric Cole kept his breathing steady as he and his squad moved in perfect sync. The Zakarans fought like lone predators, each trying to prove their dominance. But humans? Humans fought like a pack. And that was something the aliens had never seen before. The first battle. The Zakaran warrior, Jektar, roared in frustration. He had been one of the first to mock the humans, and now he had become a spectacle for his own kind. He charged at Eric, his enormous frame blotting out the arena lights. Eric sidestepped at the last second, narrowly avoiding a powerful strike that sent dust flying into the air. Jektar snarled and spun, expecting Eric to retaliate head-on. But Eric didn't. Instead, his team struck from the sides. Two human recruits, Davis and Harris, took advantage of the momentary distraction. Harris slammed into Jektar's leg, throwing the alien off balance, while Davis leapt onto his back, locking an arm around his thick, armored neck. The Zakarans watching from above gasped. Teamwork. It was an alien concept to them. Their species valued individual strength, personal glory. They fought alone, even when outnumbered. But these humans? They fought like a single unit, covering each other's weaknesses, exploiting their enemies' overconfidence. Jektar roared and struggled to break free. He flung Davis off his back with sheer strength, but in doing so, he left himself open. Eric capitalized on the moment, delivering a precise blow to the Zakaran's knee joint. Jektar collapsed to the ground, his face twisted in disbelief. For the first time in his life, he had been outmaneuvered. The aliens begin to worry. Above the arena, whispers spread among the Zakaran officers. They are not as weak as we assumed. They lack our natural weapons, yet they adapt faster than any species we have seen. How are they doing this? Vorik said nothing, his golden eyes locked on Eric Cole. He was beginning to see what made these creatures dangerous. It wasn't their bodies, it was their minds. The next challenge. With Jektar down, the remaining Zakaran warriors grew cautious. They had laughed at the humans before, but now they watched them with wary eyes. The next trial was announced: endurance combat. This was where Vorik expected the humans to fail. Zakarans were bred for battle. Their bodies required minimal rest. Humans, in comparison, were fragile, weren't they? The trial was simple: the last one standing win. Zakaran warriors cracked their knuckles, flexing their claws. This was their domain. All they had to do was outlast the humans. The buzzer sounded. The first 10 minutes were a bloodbath. Zakarans attacked in brutal succession, using their natural strength and speed to overwhelm their opponents. Several humans were knocked unconscious, carried away by medical drones. But something strange happened. The Zakarans began to tire first. They weren't built for prolonged combat. Their bodies, designed for short bursts of intense violence, were beginning to slow. Humans, however? Humans were just getting started. Eric wiped sweat from his brow, his breathing steady. He had seen it before, on Earth. Marathon runners, special forces training, survival tests. Humans had a hidden endurance that no other species in the galaxy had. The Zakaran warriors panted, their movements sluggish. One by one, they dropped. Eric and his last remaining teammates stood tall, battered but victorious. Vorik's realization. The High Commander rose from his seat. His species had miscalculated. They are not the weakest race in the galaxy, he murmured, watching Eric's chest rise and fall, sweat glistening on his skin. They are the most dangerous. A heavy silence fell over the training arena. The last Zakaran warrior collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, his claws digging into the scorched metal floor. The once mighty fighters, who had entered the endurance trial with arrogance, now lay sprawled across the battlefield, too exhausted to continue. Yet, the humans were still standing. Captain Eric Cole clenched his fists, his breath steady despite the hours of combat. His team, though bruised and battered, had not given up. They had endured. Above, the Zakaran spectators were stunned. These humans, whom they had ridiculed for their small frames and soft flesh, had outlasted their strongest warriors. This was not supposed to happen. High Commander Vorik stood rigid, his mandibles clicking in contemplation. His species had never faced an opponent like this before. The Zakarans were stronger. Faster. Naturally superior in every measurable way. But humans? Humans were something else entirely. Disbelief and denial. Zakaran warrior Jektar, humiliated from his earlier defeat, stomped forward, his golden eyes burning with frustration. Enough of this, he growled. Endurance means nothing if you cannot fight properly. They are still weak. Let me show you. Without waiting for permission, he lunged at Eric. His massive clawed hand swiped toward the human's throat, but it never connected. Eric ducked, his movements precise, controlled. He sidestepped and delivered a brutal elbow strike to Jektar's ribs, followed by a quick kick to his knee. Jektar staggered. Zakaran bones were tough, nearly unbreakable, but that didn't mean they were invincible. Every species had weak points. And Eric had spent the entire training period studying his opponents, memorizing their patterns, weaknesses, and blind spots. Jektar roared in frustration, attacking again, faster, more reckless. But that was his mistake. Eric didn't fight for dominance, like the Zakarans. He fought to win. Using Jektar's own momentum against him, Eric twisted his body and slammed the alien to the ground. A deafening thud echoed through the arena. Jektar lay on the floor, dazed, eyes wide with disbelief. No Zakaran warrior had ever been bested this way, not by a human. The audience, once so eager to laugh, now sat in stunned silence. Understanding the threat, Eric stepped back, breathing hard. He knew better than to celebrate. This wasn't over, not yet. Vorek's golden eyes narrowed. He had seen enough. Humans are not weak, he murmured under his breath. They are something far worse, they are adaptable. The Zakarans had always believed that strength was everything. That their natural-born superiority placed them above all others. But now, for the first time, they faced a species that thrived on struggle. A species that got better the harder you pushed them. And that terrified him. The next trial, a deadly change. With a wave of Vorek's hand, the arena doors slammed open. A new challenge was being prepared. One that would test not just physical strength, but the ability to survive in impossible conditions. A large mechanical platform rose from the floor, revealing an enclosed chamber. Thick walls lined with pulse emitters hummed ominously. Eric frowned. He had seen something like this before. This is a live combat simulation, Vorek announced, his voice sharp. A true battlefield. No more games. No more trials. You will fight in a real war scenario, with real consequences. The human recruits stiffened. They had expected a series of grueling tests, but a war simulation? Vorek's next words made their blood run cold. The safety limits have been removed. If you fail, you die. The room exploded into murmurs. Jektar, still recovering from his defeat, smirked. This was where humans would finally break. Or so he thought. But Eric Cole? He just smiled. Now it's getting interesting, he muttered. The silence in the arena was suffocating. The humans had survived every test thrown at them so far, but this was different. High Commander Vorek had ordered the safety limits removed. No simulations. No controlled environments. No mercy. A real battlefield, Eric Cole thought. They want to see what we'll do when death is real. But they had no idea what they were unleashing. The massive steel doors hissed open, revealing a darkened chamber. Red emergency lights pulsed along the walls, casting eerie shadows over the reinforced metal. Weapons and survival gear were mounted along the racks inside. Above, Vorek's voice echoed through the chamber. This is a live combat simulation. Real weapons. Real threats. You survive, or you die. The choice is yours. The Zakaran recruits stood tall, their exoskeletons gleaming under the red lights. They looked eager. Confident. The humans? They exchanged quick glances, silently preparing. Eric could see it, the slight tension in his team's shoulders, the way their hands twitched near the weapons racks. Not fear. Readiness. They think this will break us. But they don't know who we are. The battle begins. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them. Darkness. Silence. Then, chaos. The chamber erupted with gunfire, plasma bursts, and the roar of mechanical war machines. Out of the shadows, enemy drones emerged, hulking, insect-like machines with razor-sharp legs and energy cannons. The Zakarans moved first. They fought how they always did, head-on, brute force, no strategy. Their warriors charged, claws tearing into metal, weapons blasting blindly into the darkness. But Eric and his team? They disappeared. Humans fight differently. Let the Zakarans take the first hits, Eric thought, pulling his team into the shadows. They expect us to fight like them. We won't. As the battle raged, the aliens soon realized something was wrong. The Zakarans were fast, strong, deadly in close combat. But they lacked tactical awareness. They rushed in without cover, without coordination, and one by one, they fell. The enemy drones adapted to the Zakarans quickly, shifting tactics to exploit their reckless attacks. Then, out of nowhere, a perfectly timed explosion. A wave of fire and shrapnel ripped through the battlefield, taking down 2 enemy drones instantly. The Zakaran warriors stumbled back in shock. Where did that come from? From the shadows, Eric and his team moved like ghosts. They weren't attacking head-on. They were dismantling the enemy piece by piece. Sabotage. Traps. Distractions. Every time a Zakaran engaged an enemy drone, a human was already 3 steps ahead, setting explosives, hacking systems, cutting off escape routes. Vorik watched from above, his mandibles tightening. Impossible. The Zakarans start to panic. It took minutes for the Zakaran warriors to realize the humans weren't just surviving, they were winning. Jektar, furious at the sight of his kind being outmaneuvered, roared into his communicator. Find the humans. Face them directly. A nearby Zakaran hesitated. Commander, we can't find them. Jektar snarled. Then, movement. A figure emerged from the smoke behind him, fast and silent. Before Jektar could react, Eric's knife was at his throat. Got you. Jektar froze. The human had been hunting him. Above, Vorik stood from his seat, watching in stunned silence. The true threat of humanity. Eric didn't slit Jektar's throat. Instead, he leaned in, whispering so only the alien could hear. You think we're weak? Look around. Your warriors are dying because they can't think beyond brute strength. Your machines adapt, but you don't. You said we were slow, but we're already in your heads. We don't fight like you. And that's why you'll lose. Then, he let Jektar go. Not as an act of mercy. As a message. Jektar stumbled backward, gasping for air, eyes wide with something that had never existed in the Zakaran warrior caste before. Fear. Vorik's realization. Up in the observation deck, Vorik clenched his fists. This wasn't just a combat trial. This was a warning. Humans weren't the strongest. They weren't the fastest. They weren't the deadliest. But they were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Why? Because when you pushed a human to their limit, they only got better. And Vorik had no idea how to stop them. The battlefield had fallen silent. Smoke curled through the air, flickering in the dim emergency lights. The hum of cooling plasma cannons echoed in the distance. The humans had won. Not by brute strength. Not by superior weapons. By thinking differently. High Commander Vorik watched from his perch above the arena, his golden eyes narrowed. He had believed the humans would crumble under real combat. He had been wrong. They had done something far worse. They had learned. The aftermath. Zakaran warriors lay on the ground, dazed and battered. The few remaining combat drones sparked and sputtered, dismantled from the inside out. Captain Eric Cole stood in the center of the battlefield, his breath steady, his mind already working through the next steps. His team gathered around him, dirty, exhausted, but victorious. Across from them, Jektar knelt on one knee, staring at his trembling hands. The proud warrior who once mocked the humans now looked shaken. Eric stepped forward, his voice even. "Now do you understand?" Jektar looked up, eyes dark with confusion and something else, fear. "How?" the Zakaran warrior rasped. "How did you win?" Eric tilted his head, considering his answer. He could explain the strategy, the adaptability, the unbreakable willpower that made humanity different. But instead, he said the one thing that mattered most. "Because we don't stop." The words hung in the air. That was the real threat of humanity. When Zakarans lost, they accepted defeat. When other species reached their limits, they surrendered. Humans? They kept going. They pushed past their limits. And when they had nothing left, they still found a way to win. Vorik's decision. Vorik turned away from the scene, his mind racing. Everything he had been taught about warfare, strength, and survival had just been shattered. Humans are weak, he had once thought. Now, he saw the truth. They were the most terrifying species the galaxy had ever encountered. Because they refused to die. "This changes everything," Vorik murmured. The unthinkable offer. A deep alarm blared through the facility. Vorik straightened. A holographic display lit up before him. A Zakaran officer appeared on screen, his mandibles twitching in alarm. "Commander. The station is under attack." Vorik's body tensed. An enemy force was closing in. His warriors were exhausted. His best soldiers were injured or broken. And for the first time in Zakaran history, they had no idea what to do. Vorik's eyes flickered toward the humans below. The only ones still standing. He took a slow breath. Then, against every instinct in his body, he did the unthinkable. He turned on the intercom and spoke 3 words no Zakaran had ever uttered before. "Humans, we need you." The alarms blaring echoed through the facility. Emergency lights flashed red, casting eerie shadows across the battle-scarred training arena. High Commander Vorik stood frozen for a moment, his mandibles tightening. His pride screamed against the words he had just spoken. "Humans, we need you." A race he once mocked. A species he had deemed weak. And now, they were his only hope. Eric's answer. Captain Eric Cole wiped the sweat from his brow, exchanging a glance with his team. The humans were battered, exhausted, but still standing. Still ready. Eric turned to face Vorik, his expression unreadable. "You finally get it, don't you?" he said, his voice calm despite the tension. Vorik's claws curled into fists. He hated this. Hated needing help. Hated knowing that his own warriors, his best, had already failed. "An unknown force is breaching our perimeter," Vorik admitted stiffly. "Our defenses are damaged. We cannot hold them off alone." Eric raised an eyebrow. "You mean, your warriors can't adapt?" Jektar, still kneeling from his earlier defeat, flinched. Vorik inhaled sharply. He could order the humans to fight, threaten them into action. But he already knew that wouldn't work. Eric wanted him to ask. A muscle in Vorik's jaw twitched. He forced the words out. "Will you help us?" Silence. Then, Eric smirked. Now that's more like it. He turned to his team. Gear up, boys. Time to show them how it's done. The enemy revealed. As the humans grabbed weapons and armor, the station's exterior cameras came online. A massive black warship loomed outside, its design sleek and ominous. Vorik stiffened. It's them. Eric frowned. Who? Vorik's voice was tight. The Dravok. A species of raiders. They don't conquer, they erase. No prisoners. No survivors. Eric's smirk faded. And you let them get this close? Vorik clenched his fists. He had underestimated the enemy, just as he had underestimated the humans. Now, he was paying the price. The battle begins. The Dravok attacked in waves. Jet-black ships pierced the station's defenses, unleashing swarms of cybernetic warriors. Tall, skeletal figures with razor-sharp limbs and glowing red eyes. Zakaran warriors charged in, and were cut down in seconds. The Dravok moved too fast. Their attacks were too precise. Panic spread among the Zakarans. They had never faced an enemy like this before. But the humans? They had humanity's strength. Eric barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. Hold your fire until they commit. Aim for the joints, don't waste shots on the armor. His team moved like a well-oiled machine, setting up barricades, placing explosives, laying traps. Vorik watched in stunned silence. They fight as if they've done this before. Because they had. Humanity had spent centuries surviving war, adapting to threats, thinking faster than their enemies. The first wave of Dravok crashed against the human defenses. And shattered. The Zakaran warriors, who had begun to retreat, suddenly stopped. They saw something they had never seen before. A species that did not run. A species that fought smarter. Eric ducked behind cover, reloading his rifle. Still think we're weak, he called out to Vorik. Vorik had no answer. Because for the first time in his life, he was learning from a human. The turning tide. The humans took control of the battlefield. They anticipated the Dravok movements, adapted to their tactics, and turned the station's environment against them. They hacked enemy drones, used debris as cover, and set ambushes where the enemy least expected. One by one, the Dravok fell. Vorik watched in growing disbelief. This is impossible, he murmured. Jektar, still shaken from his earlier defeat, whispered, no. This is humanity. The final push. The Dravok leader, a towering creature of blackened steel and glowing veins, stepped forward. Its voice crackled through the comms, a low, grating hiss. You are not like the others. Eric exhaled. He could feel his muscles aching, his team on the brink of exhaustion. But he grinned anyway. Damn right we're not. The final battle had begun. The last wave of Dravok forces was upon them. The battlefield was now a chaos of fire and blood, metal and flesh. The station's corridors were filled with the crackle of gunfire and the thrum of laser beams. Eric Cole's team was battered, their uniforms torn, their bodies sore from hours of non-stop combat. But they were still standing. Eric wiped the blood from his brow and adjusted his rifle. He had fought against impossible odds before, this wasn't new to him. But there was something different about this fight. The Dravok were vicious, powerful, but Eric knew their one weakness: they were predictable. The aliens attacked with brute force, each move calculated to overpower their opponents. But they never adapted. They followed the same pattern every time, unable to adjust to the tactics humans used. And that, more than their superior strength, was why they were losing. The final confrontation. The leader of the Dravok, a monstrous figure cloaked in black armor, stepped forward, its glowing red eyes locking onto Eric. The air hummed with tension. It spoke in a guttural language that made even the Zakaran warriors stiffen with unease. "You humans are the true enemy," it hissed, its voice a rasping growl. "You cannot be reasoned with. You cannot be intimidated. You do not break." Eric met its gaze, unblinking. "No, we don't." The Dravok leader bared its jagged teeth and lunged forward, its claws slashing through the air. Eric barely dodged, rolling to the side as the alien's claws shredded the steel floor where he had been standing moments before. The creature's power was undeniable, but it was also too reckless. Eric signaled to his team, and in an instant, they moved. Flanking from both sides, they had the Dravok surrounded. The alien leader snarled in fury, trying to find a way out, but the humans were everywhere, invisible and lethal. They were too adaptable, too unpredictable. The human edge. Vorik watched from the sidelines, his mandibles clicking in quiet awe. He had seen battle, but never like this. Never with such precision. The Zakarans fought with honor and pride, but the humans fought to survive. They didn't care about glory. They didn't care about personal victory. They cared about the team, about keeping each other alive. They fought with heart, with willpower, and that was something no alien race had ever been prepared for. Jektar stood next to Vorik, his eyes wide. How are they doing this? How are they still standing? Vorik turned to him, his voice quiet. It's not about strength. It's about endurance. About not quitting. About never giving in. The Dravok leader made a desperate lunge, but it was too slow. Eric's rifle was aimed perfectly, he pulled the trigger, sending a shot straight into the alien's chest. The creature let out a scream, falling to the ground. The lights above flickered, and silence washed over the station. The battle was over. The Dravok were defeated. The final lesson. The Zakaran warriors, beaten and exhausted, stood in stunned silence. They had seen firsthand what humanity could do when pushed to the brink. They had witnessed a species that, despite lacking the raw physical power of their enemies, had managed to turn the tide of battle through strategy, resilience, and sheer determination. Eric turned to Vorik, his face bloodied but smiling. "We told you. Humans don't stop. We keep fighting until we win." Vorik stood silent, the weight of the lesson settling on him. He had underestimated humanity in every possible way. But now, for the first time in his life, he understood. True strength didn't lie in size or power, it was in the heart. Eric's voice broke through his thoughts. "You wanted us to prove something. You wanted to see our limits." He stepped closer to Vorik, his voice steady. "We don't have limits. That's the difference. And now, you'll never forget it. A new respect." Vorik bowed his head. His species had been proud for eons, convinced that they were the supreme race in the galaxy. They had conquered countless worlds, defeated countless enemies. But today, they had learned something humbling. The humans had defeated them. Not through strength, but through the one thing the Zakarans had never accounted for, heart. And now, they had no choice but to acknowledge humanity's place in the universe. In the end, the universe had underestimated humanity. But not anymore. The final words. Eric looked over the battlefield one last time, his team now gathering around him. The battle was won, but the real victory wasn't in the defeat of the Dravok, it was in the message sent across the galaxy. Humanity would never be underestimated again. And that, more than anything, was the lesson they needed to hear.